Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to our audience, and welcome. You have reached another show, an episode of The Piece of Cake, A Piece of Cake. And first we'll start with our brother Arj, okay, ARG, and he will explain what that means very shortly. So that is Abdurraheem Green.
And that is Dr. Tony Baker. Two-tone Baker.
And this is a piece of cake. I was going to say we are a piece of cake, but we're not. This is a piece of cake. Welcome again, everyone. Abdurraheem, can you explain what ARG is for those who... It's not Argentina, because my mum's now watching the show, and I want to say hi, Mum, and thanks for a lovely talk.
ARG is a acronym, or it's just shortening of Abdurraheem Green. That's it, ARG. So like it's Abdurraheem Green. So people have shortened my name to ARG. Those are the sort of acronym, right? The main point, the main titles of it. And then that's it. A lot of people call me Arj. They actually call me Arj or Org. Which is my Org is my like English, come Polish, Anthony Wacław Gavin. So there's Org.
Wow. That's the first I've heard that after.
Yeah, Anthony Wacław Gavin Green. Yeah.
And I used to be called. See, it always gets shortened. I just used to be called TB for short.
That's not so nice. That's like a deadly disease, bro.
Well, I was.
Oh dear.
Exactly.
Oh,
but no, Abdurraheem, welcome back. It's really good to see you back, my brother, and be back with you here. I think as we resume part 2 of Fruits of Dawah, I think it's only appropriate to look at and recall what took place in Paris yesterday with the decapitation of this school teacher who had apparently decided to discuss with his students the caricatures, the cartoon images, so-called cartoon images depicting Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and obviously very brutal murder and killing by this apparently Chechen, originally Chechen individual, this citizen. And obviously we always condemn wanton brutality, terrorism, violence. However, we as well always place a discernible context around things, and in no way are we just justifying this, but we need to look at the premise of why this keeps happening and has kept happening since 2005 onwards. Charlie Hebdo not so long ago, the Bataclan killings, murder and massacres a few years then, and going back to 2005, and we've been seeing this each time there's an attempt to caricature the final prophet, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I think that we should talk upon that, as because there are fruits of bitter fruits, I would say, that emanate from such behavior.
Yeah, I think there's. I mean, obviously, to be honest, one of the things that drove me to become Muslim in the first place was the blatant hypocrisy that I found in Western society. And this is something that I woke up to as a teenager. It was interesting because my father would always get me to read the newspaper, but he was always encouraging me to read different sources of information. So even though he is very conservative, he's a lifelong conservative member, Conservative Party supporter, huge fan of Margaret Thatcher. But, back in those days, it was like, I mean, he was, but he would always encourage me to, just, look broadly and get different sources of information. And I think he realized from a young age, I was really, I didn't like being fed one particular narrative. It always, funnily enough, the moment that I suppose my road to my epiphany, or my road to Damascus moment, was sitting down with a Palestinian. My parents were good when they lived in Egypt. My parents were good friends with the Palestinian family. And one night, I spent one night with this, they were playing bridge, the adults, and I sat down with the son of this couple who my parents were playing bridge with, and he was Palestinian. And at the time, Israel had surrounded Beirut and was bombing it to bits to get the PLO out. And we started a conversation, and I was going along the usual narrative that I'd been brainwashed with about the, how Israel was just defending itself. And it just went into a whole long discussion about, Israel and Palestine. And I think the thing was for me was that he showed me another side to the story. He told me the Palestinian side of the story, which I'd never heard before. I'd never heard it before. No one had ever sat down and talked it, explained it to me from their perspective. And, I came away from that very much changed from my viewpoint of, the state of Israel and what it was doing. I had a very different perspective, and I was definitely not, a full-on supporter of them after that. But I think the other thing was, the other big question that it made me ask is, why didn't I ever hear this before? How come I'd never heard this? How come I hated the fact that someone had fed me and literally brainwashed me with one side of the story, right? That made me really angry. It's like, wait a minute, I don't like ever being misinformed. I want to hear what everyone has to say. How can I know the truth? How can I distinguish the truth? And so I always, I never, from that time on, I always tried to find out whenever, I was reading some news story, I always wanted to see, okay, what's behind this? What's the other side? Yeah. What's the other side of this? Right. And that, I grew with a very, very heavy dose of skepticism growing up as a teenager. And so I used to read different newspapers. I used to subscribe to the Herald Tribune, which was a sort of American liberalish, New York Times. It was like a combination of different articles from newspapers, but it gave me a very, very different perspective on things, to be honest, from your general Daily Telegraph, the Times and stuff like that. And then I began to notice so much the hypocrisy that, while the West was talking about human rights, they were transgressing themselves really badly. Human rights. You just need to see what the United States was doing with the CIA in South America, where your mum is now, right? Ask anyone in South America, right? They're supporting of dictatorships, death squads, all supported by the CIA, all supported by America, while at the same time they were criticizing the Soviet Union for human rights abuses, right? You see what's going on. Okay, we're talking, bro, honestly, this stuff is a distraction. The real story that everyone should be talking about is not what happened in Paris. Yeah. It's not coronavirus. Yeah. There's something way more disgusting. Yeah. Way more insidious, way more scary for anyone who's got a brain. Yeah. And that is that right now in Parliament, a bill is going through on its third reading that is basically going to legitimize torture, murder, criminal acts by our secret services, by not just the secret services, not just your James Bond 007 license to kill. You're talking about the Environment Agency. You're talking about the Customs and Excise Office, right? You're talking about a whole range of government agencies who are going to be able to participate in criminal actions, and they are not. And this bill is making it legal for them to do that, and they are not going to be accountable with the minimum amount of oversight. This is something straight out of East Germany, Stasi, flipping secret police. It's madness. Like this listen, the Magna Carta, right? The Magna Carta was drawn up because barons and lords were fed up of the king doing whatever he liked and not being accountable for it.
Yeah.
That's the whole basis of what the whole idea of democracy and freedom and what, and it's literally being passed by these flipping, they're not even worth toilet brushes. They're like literally, who are these people, these MPs? sitting there passing this law and allowing it to go through. It's a disgrace, right? This is really the scary stuff that's going on. The rest of it is, believe me, is a distraction. Because when you start legitimizing and making it legal and unaccountable, that the government can, and you think it's just going to be Muslims? Oh, they'll you know, that's the Trojan horse, right? Oh, the Muslims, yeah. We were the Trojan with all those terrorism laws and prevent and stuff like that. That was just the beginning. Now, who's included amongst these radical groups? Well, Extinction Rebellion, they're on the list, yeah. I mean, grannies are involved in this stuff, right? You know, environmental campaigners, peace campaigners, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, you can be sure 100% they are on the list. They're going to be targeted, right? That means your kids, Abdul Haqq, get involved in it, or my kids get involved in something like this. You know, the police can sexually exploit our daughters, yeah, have kids with them, as it's happened in the past. The police did this with left-wing groups, right?
I know that up
and there's
close and
no
personal.
accountability. Oh, and this guy,
Yeah.
by the way, the guy who did it is now, you know, some high-ranking, qualified, you know him. I'm sure you know him very well. I've met him a few times. I mean, to be honest, I didn't until I found this out. I thought he was a super nice guy. I can't remember his name. But, you know, he was involved in this. I mean, obviously people change, but the fact is this is disgraceful, bro. Right.
So now, Abdurraheem, what you said.
Sorry,
no,
man,
what
to
you
go
said.
into a whole load of things.
No, I think it's important. I think it's important what you said, and because we are talking about the fruits of Dawah, and fruits grow in a particular climate. Fruits grow in particular soil, and if that soil is fresh and fertilized, it grows in a particular way. If that soil is polluted and contaminated, then the fruits that grow are going to be affected by that. And I want to say salams to Queen of Jordan, our colleagues.
Queen of Jordan? The Queen of Jordan?
Queen of Jordan's there. And thanks for saying hi to my mum. Then we've got Kira, who's come in. We've got Abs, who's come in there, who said he lives in France as well. And he made a good point. Jordan is there. Wa alaikum salam, Jordan. So we've got a lot of regular participants in. Really good to see you here. And Abdurraheem, in a moment, one of them asked you, what's this law? Because I know it's been discussed. I know that Jerry Corbyn and others from Labour and even some Conservatives basically said they're not signing on that bill. But the point is now, as the fruits of Dawah, when we look at that climate, we've been there before. We've been there before, where we've seen the climate has been a repressive one, but we've also seen, as you said, there are smoke screens that are thrown up. There are distractions that are thrown up. We saw that with the Gulf War, especially the second incursion into Iraq on the 20th of March 2002, and the biggest global marches against that. Yet it was the West who funded Saddam Hussein in the beginning when he was the proxy against Iran. You were saying that last week. So now the thing we've got to look at is, when we're talking about the fruits of Dawah, what is our focus? And I want us to look, we said we're going to start from the noughties, okay? Remember, we were proactive and we were not reactionary in the 90s. We spoke about topical issues, but we were very much on the front foot and were proactive. Then 9/11 came and hit everyone. The Western world, the world changed as a result of that. However, Abdurraheem, from what we were saying and doing in the 90s, it didn't come as a surprise to us, the magnitude of these attacks. But also, in bringing in line with what you were saying, we didn't jump up. We didn't jump up and say, "Oh, it's the Muslims. It's the Muslims." We spoke about ideologies. I remember the khutbah I gave on the Friday after that Tuesday, and we said, if it's the Muslims, then we spoke about the Khariji ideology. But then we spoke about the West. And we said, as one individual said to me, a non-Muslim individual said to me, when we spoke about this a few shows ago, the Americans got a bloody nose. And the reason I'm bringing this in is because there is a context to what we are doing, within which we are doing. And you've spoken to some of that now with, as you said, the greater picture. And I want the viewers to really understand this, because what we get is a polarization. You get the naysayers saying, oh, you shouldn't talk like that. We shouldn't speak in this context. We should condemn. But we need to be condemning on both sides of the fence, actually, because they're both contributory in different ways. But the greater contributors are those with the overarching societal scheme to do what we are seeing happening now under our noses.
Yeah, I think the thing, bro, is this whole thing of condemning, like, you know, there's a whole movement now of people who are refusing, absolutely refusing. I'm not even going to answer those questions. You're asking me to condemn it. I'm not even going to talk about that. I'm refusing to even participate. Like, since when does every white person have to apologize for what the Ku Klux Klan do, or for, you know, for what Breivik did, you know, in Norway, or what that Nutter did in New Zealand, right? Right? Do they feel they have to apologize?
I agree.
Does Boris Johnson, does David Cameron feel they have to apologize? Does he have to apologize for his multiculturalism is dead speech? I think it was done in, of all places, Nuremberg in Germany. I can't remember all the irony. Multiculturalism is dead speech. That, you know, this guy, these people quote this type of stuff, right? You know, why? So why do Muslims have to apologize for something that's got nothing to do with their religion, right? If some person comes along and does something that's clearly nothing to do with Islam, they love to make it out as if it's from Islam.
Right.
But they know perfectly well it's not, right? And any nutter can come along claiming he's a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Hindu, or whatever, right? I mean, forget it. What's been done in the name of atheism right now in China with the Uyghurs, right?
Yeah.
How about that? In the name of atheism and, you know, suppressing backward primitive religion, that has no place in our society and stuff like that, right? How about all of that? Does every atheist need to apologize for what the Chinese are doing because they're an atheist state? Why is this particular to us, right? You know, so I mean, do we have to keep saying, oh, Islam has nothing to do with this?
No, we don't.
Right.
No,
I mean, you know, I don't know, bro. At the end of the day, you know.
No, we don't. No,
look,
we don't.
I mean, the problem is, look, the issue is, bro, the important issue is that the West is, I always point this out. This is a very new enterprise to the Western world. The idea of actually living in tolerance with other human beings.
It is.
It's very new experience.
You're right.
I mean, it's like, not for the Muslim world, you know. So it's very interesting. You know, on my Instagram, I visited this, you know, 15th century Tudor house outside Birmingham. It was quite interesting. I can't remember Acton Court, it's called. Very pretty place. And it has these, so you and me will know about this stuff because we're former Catholics, right? So you know the history of the persecution of Catholics in England, where priests had to hide. And so basically what would happen is these militia would come and they would search houses of people who were suspected of still being Catholics. And then, you know, you'd have to actually pay them for searching your house, the privilege of having your house ransacked. But if they actually did find a priest, so they'd have all these hiding holes for priests. I'm just saying because you can see these hiding holes still there. Like you go around and they say, oh, these are the, you know, hiding holes for the priests, right? But then if they did find the priest, they would torture you and kill you, right? The 100 Years' War, which is often quoted as the catalyst for French secularism, which was a horrible, bloody conflict between Protestants and Catholics that makes any Shia-Sunni conflict look like a, you know, teddy bear's picnic. You know, this is what was going on in Europe, right? So the idea of tolerance and tolerating other faiths, let alone they wouldn't tolerate each other's faith, each other's interpretation of the faith, let alone other faiths.
Right.
And then how they brutalized the populations who they ruled over during empire, right? Let's be frank about it. You know, the Bengal famine, what the French did in Algeria, absolutely disgusting. 1 million martyrs, they call it. 1 million people brutally tortured, killed, terrorized by the French in Algeria. Horrific.
And Africa.
Horrific.
Look at the Belgians and look at Belgium.
Disgusting beyond belief, right?
That's right.
And then these people dare talk about peace and they talk about tolerance, and like, you know, they don't really understand what tolerance is. They okay, to give them credit, they have sort of tried briefly, yeah, and even then their level of tolerance is very, very low, right? You know, tolerance in Islamic societies, in Islamic civilization, is that Christians and Jews were able to apply their own laws to their own people. Right? They complain about, oh, Sharia, separate legal systems. But that's what happened in Muslim lands under the Ottomans, under the Abbasids, under the Umayyads.
That's right.
Jews and Christians had their own separate legal system. Yes, there were some overarching, you know, I suppose like a little bit like, you know, the federal system in the United States of America, where each state has its own sort of separate laws, right? But that's how it was, right? You know, religious minorities, you know, they were expected to judge themselves with their own courts and their own religious rules, right? So that sounds like tolerance to me, bro, right?
But that speaks to what you're saying. That's exactly the point. You're giving the model of Islam, and the centuries in which that was enacted compared to the relatively short, what is it, 400, 500 years, the barbarism of the rise of imperialism and the West. And as you said rightly, the Western structure, the system, is not one of peace and tolerance. It's one of conquer, brutalize, and oppress. And we've seen that, and the countries are still reeling from that now, post-colonial colonization. So what you're saying is very, very true. So there we have, if you juxtapose the two and you look at Islamic history and you look at the tolerance that happened there, when we had the Spanish Inquisition, you had Christians, monotheistic Christians, seeking refuge in Muslim lands, the Jews as well, and the monotheistic Christians, and they were given that. So my question now, Abdurraheem, is bringing it up to where we are now. The fruits of Dawah, one of the things that's really important. Wa alaikum salam, Sister Sabrina. Please put that question up again, please, Hassan, when you've got the time. She's talking about Algeria. They destroyed the education society. Yeah, this was one of the traits of Western imperialism, to basically dismantle what was there before. And when being forced to leave because of the uprisings and really seeing that their system was no longer working, they left the societies broken. And the sad thing is that some of those societies, when I was in Sri Lanka and I was being taken around for a conference, it was sad to hear one of the individuals say it was better when we were under colonization because we don't have a system now. So that mindset still prevails in many of the societies. So now, Abdurraheem, what's important, I think, when talking about the Dawah, 9/11 happened. It was something that many believe, that there was contributory factors that allowed that to happen from the Western perspective as well, to have a drive like we've not seen in centuries across Middle Eastern and other lands. My question to you is this: when that happened, did your mindset on how the Dawah should be done change? And if so, how did it change? From what to what?
That's a good question. That's a really, really good question. Look, there's no doubt, bro, that there are aspects to the way the way that we give Dawah now. And when I say we, let me be, sort of a bit specific about our era, right? Our Dawah is very non-confrontational, right? A lot of that quite confrontational aspects of Dawah, especially criticizing other religions, criticizing their books, sort of quite a hard. We literally just don't do anything like that at all. Our Dawah is very much about explaining the fundamentals of Islam and showing why it makes rational sense. So it's nice. It's a very non-confrontational. I don't think anyone really could object to it. I mean, obviously some people do. It doesn't matter. There are some people who object to religion, and that's it. It doesn't matter. They just don't like religion, so they'll really object to it from that perspective. But it's a very non-confrontational, and I think, you know, there are some things that have become very problematic, sort of aggressive forms of dawah, the old Ahmadiyya style, you know, what is now considered even the old Zakir Naik style, which is not even old, but some of his stuff is considered to be, you know, unnecessarily aggressive. And I think, to be honest, bro, I don't think it's a bad thing, right? I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that, to be fair, having said all of that stuff, right, creating a society or trying to create a society where different groups with different ideas and different beliefs and different orientations, right, and you know, it could be sexual orientations even, right? The point being is that if you like, what I'm saying is from the perspective of a liberal Western ideology, not from our perspective, right? But from the perspective of their ideology is basically, you know, everyone should be able to do more or less what they want, as long as you're not hurting anybody. You should be able to live your life, right? And therefore, but here's the thing, right? The idea of not being offensive, right? Like you can't say things that are offensive to gays and lesbians and homosexuals, right? There was a sister who was prosecuted and fined, as far as I remember, spent some time in jail, you know, for shouting things in a gay parade, right? And because it was offensive, right? So that's considered to be, you know, a criminal offense. Quite rightly, if I am racist, overtly racist, and say racist things to people, that's a criminal offense. And I think that's right that it is, because if you've got a society that is multicultural and you want people to live together, right, you have to have some, you know, limitations on how offensive you're going to be, because people are not going to take it. I don't understand, therefore, if they can understand all of this, why does this not apply to being offensive towards the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Exactly.
Why? I don't understand. If you can't abuse a person for the color of their skin, and you can't abuse a person because they're gay, right? Which is fine, right? I understand that as a, you know, as a principle in a liberal system. Why would you be allowed to be extremely offensive to the Prophet Muhammad? Or Buddha, or anyone's God? Yeah, I mean, in Islam, the Quran says, "Do not insult their gods." Right? It doesn't. So as Muslims, we're not allowed to be offensive. It never means we're shutting down debate. That is a lie, right? Muslims, we do not shut down debate. We don't. No, we just don't. What can you do though if someone just insults you? How do you respond to an insult? Because people are not engaging in an intellectual discussion. They're just being offensive. Yeah. How do you respond to someone being offensive? Well, you I guess you get offensive back, or you just walk away. I suppose you can. But then what does it mean in a society that claims to be liberal and tolerant and multicultural, right? And tells everyone we all need to get on, right? Well, I guess the French model is, no, you have to be French, right? That's it. You know, we don't recognize anything else except, you know, being French, whatever that's supposed to mean, whatever they're. And I think, you know, is an observation that Britain has moved, you know, quite a lot more towards that under Theresa May with her, you know, British values stuff, this really ridiculous, pathetic attempt to try and define British values. And what they've defined as British values, ask anyone what British values are. They won't. In fact, we did it. We did it in our era. We did a mini survey to ask people what British values were. Not one single one of those things that they now teach our kids. In school, they teach them, these are British values, right? Not one of them was on the list, right? You know what? You know what was on the list? Caring for your family. That was on British values, you know. Being nice to your friends, you know. I don't know what it was, not snitching on people. Like,
but that's universal. That's universal.
They're trying to turn us into a snitch society now.
Yeah.
With Priti Patel. Yeah. Snitch on your neighbors.
Snoopers Charter that was there before under Theresa.
I mean, you know, like the whole thing. But what they're trying to do is sort of define something that they can, you know, make people conform to.
But this is important, Abdurraheem. What you said, all of this is excellent. Jazakallah khair. The problem we have now is that in this climate, the Dawah needs to be and has needed to be that way post 9/11 with so much clarity, which a lot of it is, but with uniformity of purpose. And what we've seen is, IERA, as you said, is non-confrontational Dawah, Jazakallah khair. There are others who are doing that as well. But where we see confrontational Dawah taking place, if you want to call it that, is the internecine conflict that is amongst Muslims. And I'm not just talking about Salafis, I'm talking about generally. And you don't see a cohesion or a support amongst Muslims for this uniformity in calling to Tawheed. Now, so I'm not talking about this everyone happy and this group with a deviant idea and that group with a deviant idea. I'm not talking about that. Even if, for example, if we are calling wider non-Muslim society, and it's not just calling them to Islam, it's explaining the precepts of Islam. It's in clarifying and showing why when the Macron is saying that there's a problem with Islam. And it's laughable because when you see how they are mishandling even COVID-19, when we see how they are in confusion about their own identity, how dare he speak concerning others? Wa alaikum salam, Princess Rashida. Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So now the fruits of the Dawah are such that some of the seeds that were planted weren't planted very deeply, because as soon as a wind came and scattered the topsoil, you can see Muslims as ourselves are all over the place. Now, some may argue, but it's always been like that. But it doesn't always need to be like that, to be frank, in that particular instance. And post 9/11, you had detractors from those who was taking one particular stance to say, we're going to be transparent, we're going to try and engage with government, mistakenly so, thinking that the government would change. The government never changes, even though they give superficial platitudes and everything. Then you've got those who are always saying that, speaking to their audience, to their constituency, that they're always going to be anti everything that is societal, yet we live and abide in this society. So how does that work? And then you've got those in between who are silently going around doing what they're doing, either living by example, trying to just basically raise their families peacefully in society, but they can't even do that when the children are under a securitized lens, when the children are being told now what, flipping on its head, this thing with gender issues and everything. So no space is safe, whether it's the polarized extremes, liberalism, conservatism, or extremism. Conservatism's in the middle, even in the middle of this political spectrum, socio-political section, socio-religious spectrum. The Dawah is being bombarded or stifled from all angles, and it includes Muslims who are doing that.
Yeah, I think obviously, I think when you talk about Dawah, I obviously I'm hearing one thing, but I realize you mean something what I'm not thinking. Yeah. So sorry, bro. I sort of programmed myself, right, that Dawah means, talking to people who are not yet Muslim about Islam. But I guess when you're talking about Dawah, you mean it in the more comprehensive sense, right? And I think what you're talking about is the Dawah to, well, I mean, simply put, to Allah, but it is to Orthodox Sunni Islam, right? Orthodoxy,
yes.
Right? And yes, you're absolutely right. Now, I get what you're talking about 100%, yeah? It's a real challenge, yeah, to be, to hang on to orthodoxy. But, bro, there's a group of people who managed to, I don't know how they managed to do it, but they sure managed to do it. And that's the Jews, the Orthodox Jews.
Yes.
They managed to do it. Like, they have refused. They said, we are refusing to teach these gender issues in our schools. We're not going to do it. And it looks like they're going to get away with it. How come they've got the guts and the gumption, to stand up and say no? And they've literally said, like, if you're going to keep doing this, we're out of here. There's no room.
That's right. That's right.
There's no room for us in this society. Yeah. But you have to be principled. If you have principles, you have to stick by them. And I guess at the end of the day, of course, there are people, I know there are lots of Muslims who do think like that and who will say there are lines that we will draw. And, you know, it doesn't matter how comfortable our life is comfortable in the West. I won't deny it. You know, I love living in England. I love my life here. I generally really, you know, like the people around me. I generally have very, very few problems. You know, I'm not hugely affected by negative issues, right? You know, I've had a few problems on the borders here and there, nothing major, you know, been stopped a few
Do you
times.
think, though, that's a good point. I'm going to throw this at you then.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you my perspective soon as a Black Brit, and it's similar to yours in some respects.
Yeah.
Would you not say that that's largely as a result of white privilege that you can have that comfort? You're afforded that.
It may be, but I am very like, you know what? I'm gonna go back to this whole issue, bro. Right? And I'm gonna be really honest. Everyone may be like so shocked to hear what I'm gonna say. Yeah, but I'm gonna be really honest. Yeah. And I'm talking as a white man. Yeah. Primarily, I'm talking as a white man. That's what I'm gonna talk as. Yeah. I sometimes look and I want to say 100%, like some of the stuff I've read about especially in America, about Black people getting shot, it literally makes me want to vomit. Like I feel sick to my stomach. But yet at the same time, something is saying in my head, dude, why were you arguing? Like, why argue with the flipping police like that, right? If there's a policeman pointing a gun at you, why are you turning your back on him and walking away? What the flipping hell do you think he's going to do? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't get that. Do you understand, right? When I get stopped at the border, look, I look at this guy as, you know, he's someone doing his job, right? Most of the time, they are not malicious, they are not vicious. Someone is telling them to do this, right? Okay. And for by and large, right, most of the time, it's because they feel there is a real, genuine danger and a threat to their society and their way of life, right? What would we do, Muslims, if we had a country and there was a group of people in that country with a particular religious affiliation who were blowing up people and stabbing them on the street and chopping the heads off our teachers, right? You know, just say, for example, let's say, for example, in a Muslim country, there was a teacher who discussed a particular article some Muslim had written about Buddha, yeah, that Buddhists found offensive for whatever reason, yeah. And the article was saying, you know, why Buddha can't be God and why why it doesn't make any sense to say a man is God. And for some reason, Buddhists, you know, they took offense to it, although within our perspective, it seemed to be, you know, perfectly reasonable within the remit of our tradition to have this discussion. And some Buddhists got offended and decided to, and we have a lot of Buddhists in that country, and decided to chop the head off that teacher. What would we do? How would we behave? How would we behave if a group of people blew up people? What would we do? Right? So
can I come in on that?
Questions always to ask, right? And I do think that when I myself interact with the police or whoever it may be, you know, that is at the forefront of my mind. I'm not thinking them as of some enemy, but I don't have the experience that you had, Abdul Haqq. You know, and that it all goes back to that moment we got stopped. We've talked about this before, where we got stopped on that talk from Wales. And I can totally understand, like, how would I behave, right, if I had lived under that sort of oppression all my life? I would just be on a short fuse. And you're right, that is white privilege. That's what it is. No experience of what it means to live under that constant pressure. You know, why, you know, from the Black perspective, it must be, why are you talking to me like that? Why am I suspect? I phoned you to come and help me in a situation where I was helping this old person, right? Why are you now arresting me? Yeah, I can understand. Like, why would you
let me speak to that? Yeah, I really appreciate you being transparent, and I think this is important that both of us share this. You're absolutely
But I
right.
mean, I'm bringing it also back to this execution thing from a point of view of, you know, the way that people in the West may view Islam and Muslims. I'm telling you as a white man now, not really
Yeah.
as a Muslim, right?
Right.
Because I still understand that thought process because I came from that. You
Right.
understand? Like, I'm trying to say, it doesn't mean anyone should be treated badly. That's not right. Yeah.
No, but good. From the white man's
Yeah.
point, white perspective, that brilliant that you've put that context. Let's look at two things. The same society or security that is stopping me and others, okay? And as you said, we can't blame everyone for what happened in the past or whatever, but it's the same society that has stripped apart and decimated other societies over the years, over the centuries, and continue to have presence in those particular societies, basically stifling when they are growing. We saw what happened in Africa, in some of the African countries when they started raising up and being assassinated, CIA and everything again. That's a brilliant point that you made earlier on. So I'm bringing that to the fore. And then coming back as a black Brit, I left off in the last occasion. I had to fly back as a black Muslim, British Muslim, to face charges of attempted murder, okay, at the hands of the police.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I'd come out to Saudi, and within 2 weeks I had to, they said, if you don't come back, your name's going to be put over Interpol, charged with attempted murder. And following 9/11, when I spoke up about what Islam was, and various accusations came through and came back and everything like that, when no informing, no snitching is not something that's in our DNA from what happened to us before Islam. But then as a Muslim saying, okay, do you know what? Looking at the brutality that we faced, the hatred we had against the police, the antipathy that we had towards them, negativity. When I became a Muslim, I said, okay, and so did many from our communities, you know what? Let's get ahead of the curve. Let's not keep looking at Babylon and fighting them through this lens. Now we are Muslims. Let's take on we're proactive. We're part of a community. They want to have engagement. Let's have engagement on our terms. And we tried that for a short term and everything. Even that didn't work. Hence, some of us pulling back from that engagement with the police, much to criticism of others saying, why did you do that in the first place? Those others who were from amongst brown communities, I hasten to add, had never lived the life that we had lived as black people. So when I'm stopped at the border, when I know that on one occasion that I was going to be shot by security services, okay, who don't take the time to basically look at their own intelligence to see, well, this guy's not an extremist. Yeah. He's fought against extremists, but he's not an extremist. But the knee-jerk reaction for them is that I'm a threat. They see you, no. They see me, yes. And not only is it that, Abdurraheem, without doing their homework, knowing what it's like to be physically and psychologically brutalized through most of your life, through as though you've been hunted. When you've left your home, I dare say you've never ever felt that you've been hunted. This is how I grew up when coming out, okay? Coming out of my home every day, you hear the sirens. Ask a black man, when you hear the sirens, did you tense up? When you hear the sirens, do you think, are they coming for you when you're in your car? Yeah. That's how we lived and continue to live. When I'm passing through the airports now, because of the amount of times of being stopped, the time, and the thing is also agitating you. Abdurraheem, do you know what it's like to be agitated by the authorities when they're really goading you? When it's the police women, for me, the female police officers were the worst. Violating you physically, putting their hands down your trousers, looking you in the eye to see if you're going to retaliate. The moment you retaliate, then they're saying you're being violent, and then the male officers come. That's security services as well. So my thing is, when you've lived with that mindset, as I said, and when I was eventually let go from the police cell, that particular occasion. So we don't let people go with regarding attempted murder, but we're going to let you go on this occasion. It's like, okay, this is very strange. And then they gave me a warning. They said, oh, what happened to Malcolm X, we fear may happen to you. That's what I was told I left the police station with. So Abdurraheem, when you're living with that mindset that you're always being watched, you're always being hunted, I say always, that's our perception. You cannot but have a particular psychological perception on the authorities that are there. Even when you've tried to work in partnership with them, and then realize that, okay, government really wants to bring you in and sanitize you, which they were unable to do. They've done it with others. You and me know some of the others that they've done it with. So I really appreciate the point and perspective that you're speaking about. And from the fruits of Dawah, that's one of the reasons why, and I'm going to say this for the record now, why have I been independent? I'm not with Brixton Mosque anymore in that instance. I'm still a trustee. But why did the others said, you've got to speak, you've got a voice, do your own website and everything. So when I speak, anyone wants to know what I'm about, what I'm not about, I've got it out there. It's on the website. I speak openly. And I'll say this now. In the Dawah, part of the fruits of the Dawah that I see that have changed with social media and everything like that is that many are appealing to an audience. And I'll say for the record now, Abdurraheem, because of what we were schooled and raised upon in the Dawah in the 90s, if I've got one person listening to me, 0 people listening to me, I do not care. I'm saying that for record. Why? Because we grew on the Dawah, as you know, that the Anbiya, some are going to come with no followers. Some are going to come with 1 follower. And the essence is, as we said in Surah Araf, ayat 187 last week, the duty is to convey the Dawah. And we've obviously got to do it in the best way possible. We can't be screaming, shouting, rabid mouth, foaming at the mouth and everything like that, even though some do that. We can't be, okay, I'm going to give such a placid, liberal Dawah that it's all encompassing and everything and anything goes. It can't be one of these 2 extremes. It's got to be a nuanced Dawah that we're giving. But the changes post 9/11, for many that I saw, was that now we are appealing to a particular audience, and we've got to make sure it's like a musician. The musician makes a particular type of music, they find a formula and they stick with it in order to keep their fan base. Politicians are doing it at the time with their constituents. Muslims have fallen into that more than ever before. The big and the small of us, and I'm not inferring you or anyone else because you're quite open with what you do with your Dawah. So I'll say that to you for the record. But that's what's happened now with the fruits of Dawah. The fruits of Dawah is not so much only about calling to Tawheed. That's very important. But it's also about appealing to particular audiences. And concluding on that point there, the police, the society being concerned about threats to their society and everything like that. You said it earlier, not online, but is it chickens coming home to roost? Societies, countries across the world have been brutalized. You opened the Commonwealth and said, everyone come back to the motherland, being England. Well, hello, we're here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a whole different piece of cake, bro. I mean, that's it, bro. I was, this is the rise and fall of empires, bro. I mean, it's just, like you just need to just read what happened to the Roman Empire. You just read it. And it's like, it's a microcosm of, obviously nothing repeats itself exactly, but the basic ingredients are the same. The basic ingredients are the same, right? And these things repeat themselves with civilizations over and over and over. It's just what happens. But to be fair, bro, this is what empires do.
That's right.
The Romans did it. Even the Muslim Empire did it. Okay, the motivations of the Muslims were different. They, as we believe, they were not motivated by the desire for conquest. That was not their motivation. Their real motivation was, to spread the message and as we believe it, to liberate humanity. It wasn't primarily about conquest. But I think, for me, to go back to the issue is that for me, the outstanding issue, right, is what I find sad. I do find it sad, but it is inevitable. It's inevitable because I'm sorry to say, I have to say, I'm not even sorry to say it. Western civilization is fundamentally built upon a falsehood. It's built upon falsehood, and it is the whole structure of this universe is to pitch truth against falsehood. And what is there after truth except falsehood? What is there after Allah's guidance except misguidance? Right. And as amazing things, positive things, Western civilization has achieved, and it has. There's no doubt about it. It has also done some pretty horrific things, not least of which is the ensuing destruction of our whole planet that's taking place right now. due to crass materialism and consumerism and unbridled, following of your desires, right? That's the solution. People want green solutions and we build Teslas and have windmills and, solar panels. No, the problem is not in technology. The problem is in humans following their passions and impulses, right? But that's the whole foundation, really, isn't it? It's like, and that's history over and over, when human beings just resort to following their passions and impulses and desires. I mean, think about it. I was reading just yesterday about how Rome, when Rome was ransacked by the Vandals, I think his name was Alak or Altric, or I can't remember the king, who ransacked Rome. For, I think it was 700 years, no one had invaded Rome.
Right, that's right.
It was the biggest, most populous city. It was the first mega city, you could say. It was, maybe in China there were as well. 800,000 people lived in Rome. Yeah. After this king, this Vandal king ransacked it, there was like 500,000, 400,000. But you think, wait a minute, how did it happen that 800,000 human beings allowed themselves to be attacked and pillaged and raped and plundered? What state we were people in? Right. I mean, that's something to think about. That's what happens when you get weak and you just follow your desires, and that's what happens to civilizations. They collapse because no one could be bothered. No one who wants to fight anymore. No one does, which is good in a way, that no one wants to fight anymore. But the problem is, there's always someone ready to fight you. There's always someone who has got their eye on the prize, right? And that's the way it's been, bro. I'm sorry, that's just history, But one thing we've learned, it's not something unique to the white man that they invaded countries. That's right. And pillaged their resources. And we went through that before, bro. Like the Moors, right? The Moors were black. Yes. Right? They ruled Spain, and it was magnificent. But they also exploited. They also exploited the resources. They also exploited. One of the big issues in Spain was that the converts, the European converts, were not given, they were not given any positions. They were not really looked after. They were, there was this Arab Moorish supremacy, right? That was a problem, right? So like, you have these issues, they existed, I'm not saying it makes it right, bro. I'm not saying invading countries and enslaving millions of human beings and exploiting their resources, but it's just that's the story of civilization, But we have a good point to end on, Abdurraheem, which is to draw to a conclusion in the next few minutes. Everything you said is on point, and that's why the call to Allah in every age, in every place, in every time, this is the defining clarion call that we need to be upon, with everything you said, in any age that we're in. And if we're, as you said last week, if we are not giving that clarion call, how are we going to come to Allah Yawmul Qiyamah and say, okay, with all this mess that was happening, were we a part of it? Were we mute? Or were we through our examples, through our speech, through our conduct, in every age, saying La ilaha illallah? The only way we can solve what we are looking at is to turn to Allah, is the Tawheed of Allah, is the worship of Allah. If that's not being done, then we are in a very, very dangerous position. We are at the edge of a precipice, because we're not doing what has been enjoined upon us, whether it's by speech or whether it's by action. So I think it's beautiful that you said that. I just want to follow on from that, bro. I want to mention, go ahead, something that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, which what you said, Jazakallah khair, bro, so on point. Because at the end of the day, what defines us as Muslims? What is civilization for us? What are our underlining foundational principles? As you said, it's Tawheed. And as Allah says, be you Rabbaniyun, Rabbaniyun are the people, they study the book. We're supposed to be a people of knowledge and learning, and that's something that's supposed to be so important for us. And it reminds me of the Prophet, that he said that every generation will be worse than the one that came before it. And I think it was Ibn Abbas who explained it. He said, it doesn't mean in terms of, crop production. I'm just paraphrasing what he's saying. It's not to do with technology. It's not to do with, prosperity. It's not to do with how many crops and how much food and how much money and how comfortable one's life is, right? Like I read in the Economist article years and years ago, they said the Western society, more than any other society in the history of humanity, has succeeded in satisfying the materialistic needs of human beings. Even if that was true, which you could argue is not true, but even if it was true, so what? Yeah. What does it matter? Because as Ibn Abbas, I think it was him, he explained that it means that the scholars will go, the scholars will disappear, knowledge will disappear, right? That's what will happen. That's why each generation is worse than the next, because the further we move away from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the more ignorant we become, the more removed we are from the Sunnah, and that is the disaster. That is the real disaster, right? That is the real corruption. That is the real end of civilization from our perspective, right? If we're living in tents, but alhamdulillah, we're Rabbaniyun, we're people of knowledge and we're worshipping Allah. We don't care if we have fancy roads or whatever. That's what builds the basis of real, positive, beautiful human interaction, where human beings live in a really positive way, right?
No, you're right.
With Allah.
And the sisters are coming in with some really good comments there about the foundation being strong from Sister Shabnan. If the foundations are strong, and everything else that follows will be sound, and she's absolutely, she's absolutely right there. And I think, Abdurraheem, we've been speaking about the fruits of Dawah, and I think that this is the point that we end on what you're saying there, that we have to be Rabbaniyun. We've got to make sure that in this sea of confusion and doubt and stripping away, and we're seeing new things with gender issues and everything like that, that we've got to keep our focus. What did the Anbiya do, and what were they sent with amongst the trials that they had? We know that hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, when he got angry, when he was sitting under the shade of the Kaaba, and they came and said, would you beseech our Lord for us? And he spoke about and described the individual who was sawn in half with wooden saws and his flesh combed off his body. Yet he would not renounce his religion. Yet he would not renounce his religion. We would scream in a moment if something like that was happening. Our skin being combed off us while we were alive, being tortured in the manner that the Prophet ﷺ described. We have the story of the people of the pit, the boy and the wizard and the king. And we saw that the baby spoke in the arms of its mother, be patient when she was going to jump into the fire. This was torment. This was torment. But because, as Sister Shabnan said, the foundation of their deen was firm, that the baby, this is one of the miracles that was there, the baby in the arms of its mother said, Mum, do not fear. We're going to our Lord, basically. So we need to understand our religion and not false philosophies and the dilution of our religion, and hold on to that with dignity. And I think for Western societies and those who are looking at Muslims and at what they see as a passivity, it's not a passivity. Muslim societies, by and large, in the past, or Muslims, should we say, were at peace with the simplicity and purity of their practice, from the scholar to the normal layperson. So when they saw, it was easy to conquer these individuals, initially, Africa and the like, it wasn't because they were weak and primitive and everything like that. It's because they had an alignment spiritually that had them at peace, that they did not expect or would not expect an approaching marauding nation with the barbarism and evil intents that we saw the Western world go across to the other societies with. But so they should not take that sincerity, that serenity, as a weakness. However, on the flip side, as we as Muslims, we cannot let our anger become so toxic that we lose sight of our religion, distort the deen, and enact actions of violence, terrorism, extremism. We have to be that ummatun wasat, that balanced nation. And I'll hand it to you, and I think we can conclude if there's anything you want to conclude it upon.
No, that's it, bro. That's it. Alhamdulillah.
I'll say Jazakallah khair, Abdurraheem, for that, and Jazakallah khair, our brothers and sisters who have been engaging, watching, communicating. We appreciate that. We've been reading the what you've been posting up, and we look forward to seeing you next week, inshallah. This here is Abdurraheem Green.
That is Abdul Haqq Baker, and this was
a piece of cake. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.